today we are going to talk about year-end strategy. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. And and specifically about year-end strategy around segmentation. So, right ask, right people, right time. Um, we are proud partners, members of the partner network here at Engaging Networks, and we love to leverage their tools and technology to be able to make that strategy happen and sing for your donors. So we will dive in. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. Look at that. We've already gone through mostly introductions. We just have a few slides to give you a little bit of background on who the heck we are. P.S. All three of your panelists will be at the ENC DC. We're fun to karaoke with as well, so you should join. And smart stuff too. So we'll go over segmentation strategy, planning ahead, and then making it work, really thinking about the execution, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A for your specific questions. Please don't be shy. Okay, this is me when I wear earrings and lipstick, and I'm not doing that today. But I think the key thing here is I have been doing this for a long time, very long in internet years. Started out in about 2002, working on programs, have seen everything change and evolve over that time. And I'm really lucky to work with an amazing team at Fresh Eyes Digital. And my focus is typically on the data side, but I also do the creative and strategy as well. I will let Alana and Sam introduce themselves.
And that's my cue. Hi, I'm Alana Schreiber. My pronouns are they, them. I've been with Fresh Eyes for about 3 years, but I've been working in this space for just over 6 years at this point, primarily focusing on data and analytics in the past couple of years. But prior to that, I was working in-house at organizations on reproductive justice and getting justice for sexual violence survivors in the individual fundraising sphere. Over to you, Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Lauk. I'm the Director of Operations for Client Success at Engaging Networks. I've been with Engaging Networks for 6 years now, and I have my roots on the on the support team, and I now oversee the support team at Engaging Networks. Prior to working at Engaging Networks, I used to work actually on the nonprofit side. So I used to work for a children's literacy nonprofit called Reading is Fundamental. And I worked there about 6 years in kind of various development or fundraising roles. I have a lot of experience doing probably very similar job tasks to a lot of what the folks on the call do. And then before that, I used to work for a grocery store called Wegmans. And so I'm really good at bagging groceries. If you need any advice on that, I can hook you up. But yeah, happy to join the webinar today and just chime in about some functionality that's available in Engaging Networks to help you do a lot of the things that the Fed team is going to talk about.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. And I will just make a plug to maybe specifically ask some questions to Sam and Alana at the end. I have never actually worked in-house at a nonprofit other than like volunteering or being on a board. But both of these folks really know their stuff when it comes to systems and actually how to implement these things, even when the tools aren't totally perfect, even when your data is not totally perfect. So I think some really good experience there to lean on as well. Okay. And just like a little intro, I think since you're on an Engaging Networks webinar, you all know what Engaging Networks is. It's great. And we are an Engaging Networks partner. Our name is Fresh Eyes Digital. We're a small but mighty agency that brings together really senior online fundraisers and campaigners, and we love to develop programs for nonprofits who are looking to expand their digital reach, raise money online, and really come up with creative and tactics that resonate with your audience. So segmentation is a huge part of that, and we're really excited to be here talking about it today with you. Here are some logos. So we've worked with lots of folks. Okay. So let's dive in. So when we're talking about strategy, we want to think about who to segment or why to segment and who to target. So it would all be so much simpler if your list looked like this. So if your list was a Borg of like benchmarks, it might look like this. Everybody's joined at the same time. Everybody is given 0.2 gifts. We would get them up to one more gift at year end, which would be that benchmark 1.2 one-time gifts in a year that they were giving online. And you would try to get them up to about that benchmark one-time gift of $115. That is, I'm sure for you guys, not the case. And that's kind of the fun of it. So your list might look a little bit more like this. So, some of the typical segments to look out for are, your LIBUNs, your monthly givers, your mid-major donors, right? Lots of different segments. The main ones might be represented here. So looking at people who maybe are one-time donors, but they haven't given this year yet. And so year end is really where you're going to try to optimize and convince them to make another gift. You've got long-term folks who maybe you're trying to get up to another level of giving this year-end season. You've got monthly donors. You've got folks who are activists, possibly volunteers. That's always a really hard nut to crack. So if you figure it out, please let me know. And then folks who are maybe prospects on your list, or even more sort of out in your spheres, your social followers, or people who visit your website, right? So something like this, and you're going to want to target your asks as much as you can to their experience and what resonates with them. So why does segmentation matter? A lot of times we start with maybe segmenting to track, to start to understand these different segments and what is it that really resonates? What do they want? What do they respond well to or not so well to? But from there, segmentation is really there to help you meet that magical right person, right place, right time, magic combination. That is where your fundraising is going to be its most successful. So some things that you should keep in mind that you're trying to do with segmentation is you can try to target a segment of donors to optimize to make their experience easier, right? So if you're looking for monthly donors who you want to upgrade or you want to do something with their gift, you might leverage the different pages and functionality that let them go straight to their gift and really like seamlessly optimize their giving or give another gift. How many times can I say gift in 1 minute? We'll see. Or to test optimizations. And this is a big thing because year end is probably going to be the time of year when you have the most traffic to your landing pages and your website in the entire year from these audiences. And so it's a critical time to be able to, critical and high stakes time to learn what might work best. So that's another way that you might make it easy. You can give a special offer to certain segments, right? So we worked with one organization that often invites people in advance of year end to actually like become match donors themselves. And that's like one of those first steps they go towards being not just like a relatively high donor, but actually kind of feeling strategically involved and like working their way up into that mid-major level. You can give special matches to monthly donors, to new donors. Things like that is another thing to consider in terms of like your arsenal of segmentation offers. So you can also, and this is something that you can also try, is making it personal. So putting in little references to what they've recently done, where they came in on the list. Maybe it's an anniversary of how they gave last year, and you can follow up with those donors to be like, here's how your donation has made a difference over the last 365 days. We really need you back with us to make that next step, right? So Those kinds of things can just increase that personal relevance that helps like make you stand out in someone's inbox on the web in a way that will hopefully convince them to give and make them understand why it's so worthwhile. And then maybe the most common is to just set those levels right in terms of your gift strengths. So based on, like, nobody ever wants to ask a major donor for $25. So like that's the first thing, and the easiest thing that you can do with your segments is to make sure that you're asking for the correct spread of, lowest to highest gifts on those donation pages or in the email copy itself. And I will say we are going to have time for Q&A at the end here, but as much as I love to talk and can do it forever, please pop your questions in the chat. And even if we don't get to them immediately, we'll try to get to them at the end. So just a plug for that. Okay, so this is what segmentation can do. And how do you get started? So the first thing is, where do I need to get, right? So on January 1st, what does success look like? Probably you have projections for the whole year, your goals broken out by a month. You probably know, like, oh, I'm going to put a little bit more towards December because Giving Tuesdays in December this year, not November, all of that jazz. You need to know what your gift, your projections are, what your goals are, both with revenue. You might have donor goals as well. So start with those. Think about what you're going to be able to leverage in terms of your match pool. Matches are so critical to standing out at year-end. Kind of everybody typically needs to have one to really keep performing at your optimal level. So you're hopefully starting to reach out to your major donors now, understand kind of what you're going to have to work with, if that's higher or lower than last year or first year that you're offering a match as a part of your year-end campaign. That's probably going to tip your response up or down, right? So be aware of that. And then one of the things we always do is think about how our year-end revenue has paced across the season. So are you raising probably 30% at Giving Tuesday, and then the rest of it is up through year end, and how much is in that last 3 days? Those little things, just looking back at your historical earnings and the pacing of your gifts, is going to help you understand when the alarm bells are going off, when you're like ahead of the game, so that then you can know how important it is for you to be maybe extra aggressive with your cadence, or to pull back, or if you've got a little bit of room to launch a test that feels a little chancy. So start by knowing your goals, then let's then try to zoom out and think about who your segments are. So who are you going to actually try to segment to? And it's not just maybe like our tried and true segments, right? So the email opt-ins, the donors, the monthly donors. It's also just thinking about who is making up the majority of the revenue in your program. We know programs who they get a huge amount of their revenue from monthly donors, but not as much from individual donors. Or maybe you've got a really wide band of mid-major donors and less on the entry level. So who are you going to rely on to hit those goals? And what kinds of metrics do you really need to protect for them? If there are opportunities in your benchmarks, and you know that if you could just get your clicks up a little bit for a certain segment that's maybe big but not that responsive, that would translate to a whole bunch of dollars, right? So knowing where those strengths are that you need to protect, where the opportunities are to improve, those can guide you in terms of your segmentation priorities, because it all takes time. If you're going to start with a really kick-ass awesome campaign and then version it for different audiences, that takes a considerable amount of work, and you want it to be based on what can get you the most return for that. And then just one last thing to say here is that often when we're doing our year-end planning and thinking about, well, what tests do we want to run? Where do we want to put our segmentation juice? We can think like, well, if our target is maybe to lift the response by 5% on a landing page for this one segment, I'll look at how big it is, what our standard conversion rate is, what that plus 5% would be, how many dollars would we then get that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. That can really put it into perspective. Is that really worth the time that I'm going to put in versus maybe another segmentation strategy to either a larger or more responsive segment? So putting that in perspective of the return you might be able to target is often also helpful to think about how to use your limited time and energy. And then speaking of limited time and energy, really think about your capacity internally. Like we've been saying, it takes a lot of super smart folks like Sam and like Lana to make all of this happen. And if you know that maybe somebody's out on parental leave, or maybe you have a new person, so you're actually going to have more capacity than you did last year, really think thoughtfully about who's going to be doing that lift and how it can be doable without anybody ripping their hair out. And then the next is how much data you have about your supporters. I would strongly recommend that you really lean on the data that you feel most comfortable with in terms of segmentation. Just like you don't want to go out to a major donor with a $25 ask, you don't want to, have an appeal asking for a first gift to someone who has given to you twice and they just like escaped in your audience select. So that really is like such an understandable thing to do, but you guys know your data and where you can rely on it the most. My kid is knocking, so just bear with me. I'm busy. I'm gonna just do one thing really fast. Isn't this fun? Isn't parenting best? It is, but still. I am big. Anyway, you know what else is happening soon? Kids are going back to school. It's gonna be awesome. So when we're thinking about segments, a lot of you are familiar with the ones on the left, right? So you're gonna maybe start with thanks, y'all. Sorry about that. So we're going to start with our donor levels and make sure that you're asking them for the right amount of money that makes sense to their giving history and maybe their capacity. You're going to think about, are they monthly donors or one-time donors? Are they activists, right? All of those things are probably on your radar already. And then there's other things that you can try that are maybe more unique to you. Like we've worked with a couple of, over the last, I don't know, 8-10 years, we've had several organizations have big bumps, based on the news. A Trump bump, a disaster giving bump, somebody who's had like a premium go wild. Like you might have cohorts of donors that are unique to a moment in time that you might specifically target because it's hard to get that second gift, or you might have an offer that's particularly compelling to them. So think really like there's of course all of the tried and true, but really like respect the fact that your program is unique and you have unique opportunities and communities within your file. And so reflect on that as you're thinking about what your best segmentation opportunities are. Okay, and then in terms, and the last thing I was going to say is thinking about the segmentation that the technology, that is available to you. While I would never suggest that anyone on purpose migrate to a new CRM like right at year end, I've done it twice, 3 times. I don't know. It's hard and it happens sometimes for understandable reasons. Or maybe you've just switched your online platform. Or maybe you have been with the same platform for a long time and they're rolling out new awesome technology, like you're going to see in a second. Make sure you have a moment to check what is actually available to you that will make sense with your data set. Because you may have had some things roll out that are actually opportunities you don't want to miss. So this stuff changes all the time. And with that, I'm going to say one preview of things that are new that are very exciting at Engaging at Work specifically as an example.
Yeah, so Engaging Networks has a new feature that we are releasing at the end of this month or early next month that is called segments. You may have heard about it or read about it in some of the communications that we've sent. And segments is meant to sort of bolster the way that you can segment your supporters in Engaging Networks. And so it's eventually going to replace what is right now Query Builder and also the profile tool. And so it's going to kind of bring those two tools together. It's going to allow you to use segments across other tools in Engaging Networks. So you can use it to build your broadcast email audiences. You'll eventually be able to use it to build your marketing automation audiences, and then also do things like use it for conditional content. Sort of in addition to those items, we have some additional filters that are now available that aren't available in either Query Tool or the Query Builder or in profiles. So as noted here, there's some transactional fields that you will be able to build segments off of. And then it's also a very interesting and intuitive interface. It has drag and drop technology also available. So the UX is a little bit different than the Query Builder tool, although we do also have a traditional builder that you could use if that's your preference. In addition to those things, we also have some predefined segments that are going to be available in that tool now as well. So things, that are commonly needed or wanted by clients. So things like maybe new donors, lapsed recurring donors. I think we have like active email subscribers, things like that. So those are going to be segments that are already available and ready to be used in your Engaging Networks account without you needing to build them. And so, like I said, tentatively, this is going to be available on August 30th, but it may be the week after that, so it may be early September. And in its first iteration, it's going to be available to build those segments and export the supporters that qualify for those segments. And then it's also going to be available to the marketing tools module, and you can use it to build audiences for those broadcasts, and then also use it to target supporters using conditional content. And then in future releases, we're going to make it available in other places in the platform, like marketing automation and other parts of the platform. So that's it.
Was muting in case my daughter made another appearance. But I know we are very excited about this rollout and about sort of what's going to come ahead in the months ahead as more rolls out. So stay tuned, please. And I think just one thing we wanted to talk about here is like, okay, blah, 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 you're talking about the theory of this, but where have people actually used it? So we've sprinkled in a few case studies. One is really talking about paying attention to your segments in terms of being kind of that canary in the coal mine of like, where do I need to pivot during year end? And this was one example where we worked with kids in need of defense in a moment after they had done a huge CRM migration and really were only just getting to know the unique response rates of their list at year end. So making projections for everything was a little bit difficult, especially because they'd also been building their list. So they had a lot of new folks on their list. So one thing that we were able to do in that first year end season was to, through Giving Tuesday, really get a little bit more of a handle on what the unique segments were, and really see that with the unique response rates of each different segment, we were going to need to up our cadence in the next weeks to stay on pace. So we inserted a flash match. We put in several more like resends and unique appeals, and that was able to keep us on pace to hit our goal by the end of the year. So not exactly about like testing, but certainly about paying attention to how those unique audiences are performing and then adjusting accordingly. And that is that example. And then when you get past the planning stage or past the sort of like, who do I want to segment to and why and what are my goals, then it really comes to like, oh, how can I really make this happen? And that is where I would like to point you towards Alana, who is great at that, whereas I am not good at planning. So Alana, tell them, don't let them listen to me.
All right. So when you're creating your audiences, the first thing you really need to think about is where your data actually lives. It might just natively live in engaging networks, or it might come in there through a regular sync. If so, congratulations, you get to skip most of the steps. If it doesn't, whether it lives in another system that never talks to engaging networks, or another system that you do manual imports into engaging networks from, you still absolutely can get it into engaging networks before year end. You just have to make a plan for doing so. So when you're making your plan, first, make sure it's possible and you have a person that can actually do it. And then second, think about what your capacity is going to look like at year end season. We know that this season is one of the times where it often just feels like a crunch no matter how much planning you do. So if someone has capacity in, let's say, March to be able to do a regular refresh, are they going to be able to do that in November? Are they going to be able to do that right after Giving Tuesday? It's really important to think about. If they're not, then you might want to consider switching to a different segmentation structure that allows you for more ease of setup. If you do want to add data into engaging networks, one way is to do it is just by having your regular sync. And then there are so many different manual import options that I'm not going to list them all here to save us both that time. A couple of my favorites are doing a CRM segment or a question response, and a little sneaky one that I like to do is also sometimes uploading people to a throwaway page with a specific EN tracking parameter. I've had a couple of instances where people's data structure is very specific with how they use questions and how they use CRM segments. So in order to identify a group of people, they didn't want to use those. So just by using an EN tracking parameter, we were able to have that data that we could query on without messing up their existing structure. Rachel, you can go to the next slide. And now everyone's favorite part, or at least, no, it's not even mine, but one important part is making your timeline. So when you're making your timeline, which honestly, you can all start doing now if you haven't already, there are a lot of key questions that you need to ask. The first one, which for me is honestly one of the most important, is how long does it take for everyone to make content, and how long does it take for everybody to review content? And also, who's doing all of those things? When you're thinking about what a timeline looks like in terms of how many days, which people are on deck, if you are able to solidify what the plan is, obviously knowing that there will be exceptions to the rule, you're going to have a lot more steadfast data to build on to have a more accurate timeline. Another thing to think about is what challenges you've had in past years. Maybe you were having an issue getting a sync set up. Maybe a review process, someone wasn't able to review, or they reviewed something incorrectly. What can you do? What can you learn from those to make sure that this year it goes a little bit smoother? And finally, as working with nonprofits, you always want to innovate. You always want to be optimizing your pages and emails and segments to reach those donors. But we know that doing all of these things takes time. So is it going to take extra time to do so? Probably. And if so, how can you accommodate for it? For example, if you do a really thorough QC of every single email and you're A/B testing with a lot of different content variations, that means you're going to have double the amount of emails to QC. Do you have capacity for that? How much extra time does that take? All those important things that you should be thinking about. And some tips and tricks. So first, I honestly really like to work backwards from my first launch date. So if I know that my first pre-Giving Tuesday email is going out like 2 days before Giving Tuesday, I start right there. And then I say, okay, then when does that email need to be scheduled by? When do tests need to be reviewed and approved? All the way back to writing content or a campaign plan phase. That allows you to see where there might be tight spots really early in the process and adjust for those. Next one is planning for holidays and outages. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have accidentally planned a task for a 3-day weekend, or when someone's out of the office for a couple of weeks. It's more times than I care to admit. But it's really important to think about because A, you need your people to be there. And B, if let's say your designer is going to be out for 2 weeks when you normally have design going on, you need to figure out then, Is design going to happen at a different part of this process, or who's their backup? Third, buffer time. Buffer time is absolutely wonderful. It is often a line to straddle on having too much buffer time and not having enough, but I always lean towards having too much because worst case scenario, you're done a couple of days early. And more realistically, when just inevitably something comes up, you have that extra time to accommodate for it. And then documentation, I personally love some documentation. And so documenting roles and expectations for deliverables, really having it written down in one centralized place, who's doing what, and what does it actually look like for their job to be done. This has two purposes. The first being that then you have buy-in from everyone who's really going on this journey with you of exactly what they're doing. And the second thing is, if something happens, say someone gets sick, someone switches roles, you know exactly what you need a new person to fill in for. And finally, contingency planning, which we will talk about on the next slide.
Yes. But I will affirm that very recently, when Alana got COVID, I read all their amazing documentation and was able to do a few of their reports. So just a plug for that.
Well, contingencies do happen. And I don't know if y'all know, but there's a couple of things going around in the world right now. Who's to say, really? And especially near year end, we're apparently going to have some election results, which I'm sure won't impact fundraising at all. But realistically speaking, for a lot of organizations, they definitely will. And also, this world is a crazy place. Things are going to come up that we have no idea about right now. So what can we do to plan for external news? The first thing is for stuff that you do know is coming up, like election results, having multiple different options for copy and graphics. Say one for if Kamala Harris wins, one for if Donald Trump wins. Having that baseline to start, even if you then have to make edits later down the line, it is always easier to edit versus write at the beginning. And the other thing is figuring out what does it look like if we're responding to a rapid response? Instead of having 3 people review the email, are we only going to have 1 person? Are we going to do less testing or different testing? If you figure that out ahead of time, then when you're actually in the moment, you'll have a lot fewer questions. And then the other thing is internal disruptions. You know, someone will be on leave, someone could find a new job, someone could switch roles. You want to prepare for those eventualities before they actually happen. So staff backups and cross training is really crucial, making sure that there's never just one person where every single thing that they do lives inside their head. And then also, you know, I love it, documentation, being able to, if you have an unexpected outage, have someone look at a sheet and say, oh, this is exactly what I need to do. Is, I know on my end when it's happened for me, beyond important.
All right, and just to share some things from the engaging network side of things. So going into year end, some considerations you might make. As Alana was saying, you should be quality controlling your pages, your emails, things like that. So maybe consider doing a code freeze around year end. So once you've done that quality control, not making substantial changes to things that could be things that you have to troubleshoot during the busiest fundraising season. So consider not making substantial changes to those things during that time. A couple of things to note in terms of how engaging networks works that might impact some of either your decision making or things that you do during very busy times. Engaging networks accounts can have 4 jobs running concurrently, and 2 of those jobs can be are reserved strictly for email sending, and 2 others are for other job types. And so I would say in my experience, most clients don't have multiple emails sending out at the same time, but just want to make sure that you're aware of that functionality. And then another question that we get pretty frequently around this time of year related to email sending is, oftentimes folks are on, they're taking time off during the holidays and they want to be scheduling emails in advance of particular days. And they want to know if an audience that they create now, kind of how that all works. And so basically, like if a supporter newly qualifies for the audience that you selected a week ago, kind of what is the behavior there? And so just flagging that email audiences queries are built immediately before an email sends. And so, if you were doing something like selecting donors or excluding donors, and in the time that the email was scheduled, another person gave, they would still be excluded from that particular email send. Just flagging that if you are going to use profiles, profiles do work a little bit differently. You have to either schedule those or manually rerun them. There's no like automatic process that'll rerun those before an email send. So just flagging that as well. Also, our support team is typically available from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Fridays. And then, you know, we have a lot of regional holidays that we recognize as well. On very high fundraising days, we do have extended availability. So that includes Giving Tuesday and also December 31st. Support will be available until midnight Eastern time on those days. And then just want to make sure that you are aware of, you know, some other resources that we have available. And so we have the Engaging Networks Supportal, which is just a knowledge base that has all the documentation telling you how to use different tools. And then we also have the Engaging Networks Academy, which is a like a video archive where you can, again, learn about all things engaging networks. So those are 2 free resources that are available to all clients and that we encourage you to make use of.
Exactly. And I thought maybe we would pause just really quickly because a question has been coming up in the chat about maybe that, like how to prioritize your energy between, say, like Giving Tuesday and year end. And I know a lot of folks can be understandably cranky about Giving Tuesday because we're all bombarded. I will admit I kind of like it because it's another day that I can earn money towards my projections. But I think the question is, how do you think about whether it's worth it and who it's worth it for? And I would say one has just come up in the chat, which is it's a nice day that everyone might expect to be asked for a gift. And so your monthly donors is an interesting segment to include in your Giving Tuesday campaign because it's an understandable time for you to ask them for one special one-time gift, especially if it's going to be matched. That is going to have a little bit less friction in the ask for them, even though they give monthly. And I would say another one, Terry, you were asking about this is I would say anybody who is a non-donor. It's a really visible, really, and you can kind of get fun with it. With Giving Tuesday themes and such. It's a time when we often see a lot of engagement with first gifts. So I would, if you have the stomach for it, I would definitely not skip Giving Tuesday. But those might be 2 audiences that you could particularly look at. I would also say maybe lapsed audiences as well. And yeah, so those might be some first thoughts, but if anybody has any other suggestions, please pop them in the chat. And I think the other thing that came up before we keep going is that sort of question about how to, you know, how to be working backwards and have everything lined up in time. And Terry was mentioning in the chat that they have their donation page like on lockdown by September. And I think the only thing I would say there is that that is a really awesome. Oh, we've got a question from Emma about the community space, but we will we'll maybe answer that in the chat with Austin's help. But the question there is, you know, how far in advance do you need to lock everything down? I would say as far as you can, but I wouldn't say that that prevents you from doing testing of new things. So you might want to, in advance, have an A and a B version of your donation page ready, tested, QC'd, all that good stuff, but still be open to learning about which one is doing well and potentially to roll it out to folks. Maybe you do the test on Giving Tuesday. If you get some good directional results, roll it out for the rest of the year-end season. I think you can do both the testing and the prep well in advance. Okay. And Gabby was asking if that is for SEO purposes or making sure your form works. I would say you're going to want to have good SEO practices, and certainly with your main donation page, that's the most important. So that is a function, but I think really it's just making sure that everything is working, functional, no typos, no weird things that you see downstream. Maybe like, oh, everybody's making the gift fine and the user experience is right, but somehow like a tracking code is falling off because of some blip in your URL, right? Like little things like that. That's what you want to head off at the pass by just having everything ready in advance. Okay. So past the making it happen, or past the planning, getting into making it happen. So I'm going to turn this back over to Sam and Alana to talk about some of the functionality options that you have at your fingertips.
Yeah, so just talking about some features that are available in engaging networks when it comes to email broadcast sending, or also some of this extends to SMS sending as well. So we offer conditional content, and so you can send a campaign that has different content to supporters based on either profiles or soon to be segments that you've created for those supporters. And so that is a feature that's available. We recently extended the functionality of something called Next Suggested Gift to our marketing tools feature as well. So Next Suggested Gift allows you to display a custom ask string to your supporters on pages based on their prior giving history to your organization, so that you can either use highest previous contribution or most recent contribution to basically build that ask string. And as it relates to emails, it allows you to basically put in a single value into the email that is specific to that supporter. With marketing tools, you can also do split testing or A/B testing. And so you can test different content and then have, you can test different content for a segment of your audience and then have the kind of best performing email be sent to the remainder of your audience. And so there's some options there that include automatic sending based on criteria that you like pre-select. So it could be things like opens, clicks, page conversions, or you can also manually select a winner based on whatever criteria you review. There's also a feature called send time optimization. And so that allows you to send emails to supporters that will send based on their own time zone. And so if you selected like a 2 p.m. send time, it would send to that supporter at 2 p.m. their local time. So that's another great feature. The fifth item there, send prioritization, is related to conditional content. And so there might be a scenario where maybe you want to send conditionalized content, but maybe your supporters fall into multiple segments or multiple profiles. And so I think an example I frequently use is maybe like donors and volunteers. So maybe you have someone that is a donor and a volunteer. And in that case, you can prioritize that content. And so they will get the version that you have deemed more relevant. So, arguably, maybe that would be like the donor content versus the volunteer content if they fall into both. So that's a feature that's available. And then the sixth thing here are just some features that are native to engaging networks. So for example, we have some features that protect your email deliverability. So supporters will be suppressed from your email sends if they do something like mark an email as spam, or if the email address hard bounces, that'll be automatically suppressed from future email sends. And then we also have features like seed lists. And so maybe you have a group, maybe it's like your staff or something like that you always want to receive every communication, regardless of the audience you're intending to send it to. You can use our seed lists functionality to send to that group. And then just the last item there, I think we already touched on, but we do have a new feature called segments that'll be coming out at the end of this month or early next month. That has kind of just bolstered the way that you can build your audiences and segment your supporters.
And I'm gonna fly through this because I know we're coming up on time, but just an example of one of the ways we've done some testing and segmentation in the past, actually not for an engaging networks client, but for a group that was thinking about how to minimize unsubscribes to their prospect list. So we ran a test where we just actually added a little bit of personal cultivation content right below the sign off on the appeal. Sort of pushes the edge of best practices because it did include a link to something else other than the donation page. But since that was the priority there, we tested including that in some of the year-end content because it was concern about them having unsubscribe spikes from this new list. And we were able to bring it down by 33% year over year just by the inclusion of this little like speed bump was what we called it. So just an example of some of those little things where you can optimize and bring up a rate or bring it down in this case with these tools and functionality. And then beyond the email, of course, there's the donation page, which is a huge area. So I'm going to pass it back to that, and we'll go through these last slides pretty quickly in case there's any last questions.
Yeah. So a lot of this is kind of congruent with what we were just talking about with broadcast emails, but just flagging that on pages, you can use that next suggested gift functionality, which again is that custom ask string based on a supporter's prior giving history with your organization. You can also offer conditional content on pages. And so you can have the content on the page. So that could also be a way of offering a different ask string to supporters. You can offer different content on pages based on, again, the supporter's profile membership or if they're part of a segment moving forward in the future. We also have a page type that's called split test, which would allow you to split test your pages. We have a couple of features that can help you raise hopefully a little bit more money or get some more recurring donors. So we have an upsell lightbox that it can be used to upsell your supporters who make a one-time gift to make a recurring gift. So that's available out of the box with Engaging Networks. And then we also have a feature called fee cover, which allows you to add a small percentage or have the supporter choose to cover any fees, either as a flat fee or as a small percentage to cover any fees you might incur from like your payment gateway or something like that. So that's offered as a checkbox, and the supporter would just opt to cover those fees or not.
And zooming through this as well, just as one last example. Last year-end season was ATS's first end of year in Engaging Networks, and we wanted to use the next suggested gift tool, but we ran into a couple of issues with that, primarily being that they had a lot of offline data, both from before Engaging Networks and continuing on past the migration, that exclusively lived in their external CRM and they didn't want to bring into EN. And it was really important to have multiples of the number 18 in the gift string. So to create a workaround, we made a constituent field for most recent contribution and then built profiles based on the ranges that could be in that field. For example, null, under 100, et cetera, all the way up to 1,000 plus. And then use conditional content on the donate page to create different gift strings based on what profile you're in. And then finally, we made campaign links in all of our broadcast sends so that folks were able to get to their right page. And this did work out pretty well. We saw a 9% increase in revenue and a 63% increase in gifts. And non-donors who we were really focusing on this just smashed it out of the park. And Morgan, to answer your question, because 18 in Hebrew is chai, which translates to life. So it's a very important number for a lot of Jewish people. And Rachel, back to you to wrap it up.
Yes. I think we have just a few more minutes for questions. So Gaby has, I'm just hold on, sorry, not right, has asked one, which is about one of those options that you can deploy to different segments, which is the monthly upsell Lightbox test. Do you need to set it up on 2 identical donation forms and then switch out the Lightbox on one? So Sam, that might be a good question for you.
Yeah, I think you're maybe asking about like A/B testing or split testing using a Lightbox versus not using a Lightbox. And so, yeah, that's how I would envision testing that, is just having 2 identical pages where you have the Lightbox enabled on one and the Lightbox not enabled on another.
If you think of anybody else who might be interested in some of this content, just like this refresher on things that you can do to optimize your segments, we will have a white paper coming out about that, going over some of this content, a little extra content there as well. So you should just stay tuned.
Yeah, coming soon. We'll let everyone know about that when that's out as well. Though I also meant to mention that there's a recording of this webinar as well, if you want to share this with any colleagues for any ideas, and if you want to kind of get that conversation going. And obviously we can always forward questions onto the Fresh Eyes team, and then ones that Sam could handle here as well on our end. I was going to ask a question just more high level. When you kind of mentioned some good go-to things when you're kind of planning these campaigns, but this is kind of a question we've asked in the past with other kind of topics like this that have come up. When something does go wrong, but it's kind of too late to make big changes, I think you mentioned like the kind promo, flash appeal, some other kind of little things that you did. Right. But are there any other kind of just like short answer, I'm going to put you on the spot with this, but like pivots that people can kind of like think about, or changes that they can make kind of quickly if they're in the middle of things already that come to mind?
I mean, I think that like the cadence is your easiest answer, right? Is like getting out maybe another like few resends, right? Or a lift note about something else. There's always like, if things are not going well, for example, and you're just like trending behind, you could be doing an extension. And it's nice to have that in your back pocket. I would say on both Giving Tuesday and December 31st, we've started to see the like window of where people like that peak of gifts widen a bit, like beyond just that day, like day before, day after. So leveraging those are really good. I think the other thing I might say is just if it's like a mistake, for example, that just went out to another audience. We have one in a group that we worked with that just sent out something that was like, oh, whoops, we said the wrong date. We're human. You don't have bots writing your emails over here. Sorry about that. And actually, just because it was done in such a relevant, like human way, they got $1,000 gift from that apology email. So I think that rolling with the punches and acknowledging it is a good way to go too.
I think one other thing, especially like if you're building segments with data that you haven't used in the past, is have a backup segment. It is never a bad idea to have a segment that like, you've emailed to the segment before and it's worked before and there's no reason why it'll fail this time. Just in case something goes wrong with your data on your end, just having that backup, I know for me, it makes me feel a lot better.
Those are great ideas. I love that. I love the just, don't think too hard. Make a mistake. Basically, it could end up being a benefit. And then, but at the same time, have a backup plan. Have a backup profile segment. Whatever. So it's finding that balance, I think. So, which all of us are all, I'm sure trying to find here. So, I know there are more questions out there. I'm also aware that we're reaching the top of the hour here, and I want to be aware of everybody's time here and not feel like you need to stick around if you have something else planned after this. Please do send those questions on. I'll just say you can send them on to me, which is just austin@engagingnetworks.net, and I'll make sure the Fresh Eyes team get them. If you have any questions about anything else, I can make sure those questions get to the right place as well. Thank you so much for being here. This is so much great information. I'm so glad we recorded it so we can actually go back and like go deeper dive on some of these amazing slides you guys have created. So thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone here for attending.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Appreciate you joining.